We got a little bit more news for Dark and Darker conflict going on. Let's see the possible result of Dark and Darker's future. Let's go ahead and take a look at what this was about. This was posted 6 days ago by Kira. So we're going to check that out.
Hopefully at this stage we're all aware of what's going on with Dark and Darker. I did just want to bring you some information though that might be interesting if you are keeping up with what's going on and want to see what might happen regarding this case. The case being, of course, ironmace, who makes Dark and Darker, have allegedly stolen trade secrets from Nexon, the company who were previously making a game called P3. The people, specifically the main guy in charge of P3, decided he was going to upload a bunch of files to a private server, get fired from the company due to disciplinary action, which has happened twice in the history of Nexon in like 20 years. Despite a massive labor union existing which would have backed him and helped him and stopped him getting fired or helped him to go to court and get damages if that was wrongful dismissal in any kind of way, and then make a game studio and basically reproduce one-to-one the same game he was making at Nexon, which is why they're alleging trade secrets. And of course there's a whole bunch of noise surrounding what is the actual problem, what are the allegations, and what people think is going to happen. Unfortunately, one of the narratives being painted in Western, I'm not going to say mainstream media, but, mainstream game coverage, reactions, big commentary channels, etc., is that this is meritless and it's Nexon being a big bully, and essentially they have no case and nothing's going to happen here. Obviously, my coverage has been mostly focused on the details you don't know and why that's probably not the case and why this is probably going to end up being real bad. Now, we have a perfect...
And to be fair, catch you guys up on the other part, was one thing that I noticed was the investors pulling out on the Dark and Darker project, which them knowing more in the industry than us, obviously, that's a bad sign and it could mean something bad. So I think maybe something might be going on here that we're not aware of.
Example here of basically looking at what might happen, which is good news and maybe a little bit of bad news depending on who you are, because we have Terra Online. Now this is a perfect example to look at, not only because it's from two big game companies, but because it's for similar reasons that it's going on, as well as this was fought in North America civilly, as well as civilly in Korea and criminally in Korea, which is almost certainly what's going to happen with ironmace and Nexon. So what happened with Terra? Why did this lawsuit happen? We're going to go over right now from the Korean articles and stuff, which is a little bit difficult to find, so a Korean person helped me with this one and translated everything. So in September 2006, development manager A leaked NCSoft's trade secrets to Japanese game company Square Enix. In February 2007, he was dismissed. The majority of the development team of Lineage 3 followed. Again, if you follow the ironmace Nexon thing, this is almost exactly what happened. Right. Although instead of leaking to Square Enix and a Japanese company, he leaked to himself. So the guy in charge of ironmace confirmed that he had a private server that Nexon told him not to use that was full of files for a game that they told him not to have on there, which he then later went and recreated, or at least that's the allegation. NCSoft reported the leaked trade secrets of Lineage 3 to the police for investigation. Within a few months, Bluehole's office was searched and seized, and the leaked materials were deleted after the search. Now, other than this deleted section, this is one-to-one yet again between the two scenarios. Ironmace's studio was raided by police months later for a search and seizure, which does go to show, and it'll come up in a second, that when this is going on and it's criminal in Korea, they do have the due process of, like, it took months to get to this stage before they went and actually searched this office. It's not just like call up, oh, there's somebody in danger, and then the SWAT team shows up, which of course some people were saying in my last video that the police raiding something doesn't mean anything because it happens all the time in America. Not the same thing. By August, NCSoft filed a civil lawsuit for compensation of damages, 7.2 billion won, claiming infringement of trade secrets and mass resignment caused the cancellation of the Lineage 3 project. So there's similarities here. The mass leaving of the company, which basically tanked the project. I've seen, again, a lot of people saying, completely incorrectly, that the reason the people left Nexon to go and remake the game anyway was because Nexon killed the project and wouldn't let them complete it. This is completely incorrect based on all the information we've got. The project was only shelved due to the fact that all these people quit. Due to the fact...
Okay. So they decided to up and leave the company and go do it on their own, make a similar game, so the project was shelved because of that. Okay, I got it.
that they had to fire the lead guy, and then 10 of like 23 employees quit with him to go and form this new studio. Now, there is also a difference that this lawsuit was filed for compensation of damages, which, as we'll see later on, was probably a mistake to do, and also makes it different from the Nexon ironmace, because so far they're not suing for compensation, although maybe that will be a factor later. Now, as you can see here, December 23rd, 2008, the former development managers and others.
And again, guys, this isn't what's going on right here in this article. This isn't what's happening with Nexon and ironmace. This was a totally different situation with NCSoft and Bluehole. But the reason he's bringing this up is because they're almost identical in what the cases were
indicted by the prosecutor for the leaked trade secrets of Lineage 3. So this was serious, and people were facing prison time over this, which again is exactly what's happening to people in the ironmace studio. If found guilty, they are going to go to prison for stealing trade secrets. There is precedent for this already. And there's a wild detail here, which we're going to get to in a minute. I'm not going to spoil you, but follow me down this rabbit hole. January 22nd, 2009, Bluehole announced its new game Terra with NHN as the publisher. So basically, while this person was on trial for stealing trade secrets, the trade secrets that they stole, or allegedly stole, was used to build Terra Online, which of course NCSoft were alleging that they basically ripped from Lineage 3, which caused them to cancel the project. Then on June 26, 2009, criminal trial first instance verdict, 5 defendants were found guilty of leaking and using trade secrets. This almost certainly, I believe, from what I've seen so far from all the Korean stuff that's came out, the insider leaks, etc., as well as what ironmace has said, I believe this is almost certainly going to happen to the ironmace situation. I think the person who had the server is almost certainly going to be found guilty on this. Again, that is just my opinion from interacting with all the information on this that I've been able to see that's been put out by both sides, and of course researching what happened with the Terra, Bluehole and NCSoft situation. Then later that year, the 23rd, 2009, criminal trial second instance verdict, where an additional guilty verdict was put forward for the defendant who was acquitted in the first instance. Then in 2010, Terra was released. And when it released, of course, they then took the matter civilly. This is the reason why there is no civil suit currently in North America or in Korea for ironmace, and
because the game hasn't been released yet.
And they're getting darker and darker because it's not released, and that's why the DMCA is there to block the game releasing, basically. Because how this process typically works is there's a back and forth between both legal teams, and what Nexon have done is put forward this DMCA to pull the game from Steam, and then they give the ironmace studio and their legal team 7 or 10 days roughly to respond with a counterclaim. And as soon as they put forward that counterclaim with evidence, Valve basically turns it back to Nexon and says, Nexon, what are you going to do about this? And if Nexon doesn't do anything in their 10-day window, then the game comes back on Steam and it's considered solved on Steam's end, although they can still file a lawsuit. But typically what will happen is when that counterclaim comes in, that's Nexon's window to then put forward a lawsuit and take this to a civil court. So there you go. Within 17 days, the civil trial first instance verdict ordered NCSoft's former employees and B company, Bluehole, to pay 2 billion Korean won for compensation of damages. So they are found at least partially guilty as a company in the first civil trial. But then a day later, during the second instance verdict, they acknowledged the leaked trade secrets but dismissed the damages caused by resignation. Then a whole year later, copyright infringement lawsuit filed in the US, because as you can see, the game released in Korea in 2011. So this obviously lines up with when the civil instance began.
Right, and then US a year later.
EU and NA, May 2012 is when they knew that Terra was releasing in the West. And that's when you can see here, start of 2012 is when they started the copyright lawsuit filed in the US, because if the game's not released or releasing in the US, then obviously you're not going to be suing them in the US. And they did it for the same reasons: trade secret infringement, breach of confidentiality obligation, and unfair competition. Then as you can see, there was an appeal for the criminal trial, which upheld the second instance verdict and dismissed the appeal on criminal grounds. Again, this might be a little bit confusing, but the criminal matter and the matter of Bluehole as a company, two different things. Important to remember, because this is exactly what's going on with the Nexon and Dark and Darker. There's two different entities here. Ironmace is a studio, and the people who are being accused criminally of doing something. So the criminal matter of the individuals might bleed over into the civil matter and affect the studio, especially when it comes to money, and nobody's going to touch it while there's criminal investigations going on. But the civil matter with the studio is currently not really existing.
And that could really hurt Ironmace too, financially, which is probably why they're having that GoFundMe as a backup, because we might see something like this occur. And with them not being able to touch that money, and with the lawsuits, they're going to be hurting for money.
Than the DMCA, and then being unable to release the game on any platforms in the West, and obviously not in Korea because they don't even have a publisher. Now, settlement reached in the US regarding the copyright dispute. Why did this happen? Why did they end up settling? Why did NCSoft not pursue this to the max? Well, it's because on April 18th, 2012, Mass Entertainment, which again is the Bluehole, announced they were found not guilty in the Korean civil actions. However, 3 employees were found guilty. So basically, to make sense of all of this, the studio was found civilly not guilty, but the people were found guilty. So instead of continuing to drag it through courts and perhaps reach a similar verdict and not have the criminal element in the US, of course, they settled. The terms of this settlement was never made public, so we don't know exactly what happened in terms of who gave up what, who conceded on what points,
interesting.
if there was money changing hands. Literally, it's a black hole. Nobody knows. But it continued, and again in third instance by the Supreme Court, they upheld the second instance verdict and dismissed the appeal. Now, what happened to the people? Well, the main person, the person who was overseeing the Lineage 3 project, received 1 year and 6 months of imprisonment with 2 years probation. So he went to prison for this. Development team leader, guilty of overseas leakage of L3 planning documents, received 8 months in prison with 2 years probation. Then everyone else basically either was found not guilty or had to pay a fine. Now, what does this all mean? Why am I bringing this up? Well, there's 2 big things here. Basically, NHN is a fairly large company that were bankrolling Terra and the Bluehole studio from the very beginning, which means they had access to a legal team from the very start, whereas Ironmace claimed that they had no money, no investment, and didn't have a legal team from the very start. So why does this matter? Well, Bluehole would of course have been getting told constantly how to avoid the situation and basically getting themselves in shit, and how to develop the game using those trade secrets without the company being possible to be found liable as an entity due to the material that was taken from Lineage 3. Whereas Ironmace, from their own words and their own testimony, they had no money from the start, to the point where they were sleeping in the office without heat, if we are to believe what they said in their prior statements. Which means they had nobody telling them, how do we avoid, if we have stolen these trade secrets, how do we avoid, if this does go to court, our company being held liable for this? What workarounds are there legally? What can we leave out? Which means that the chances Ironmace did everything by the book, and even if they did do something wrong, essentially hid the fact that they did well enough that this is not going to be a problem, is almost zero. And of course, the difference is Nexon know more than almost anybody in the world the exact situation between NCSoft and Bluehole. And how did they know that? Well, because the person who was literally found guilty and sent to jail, sent to prison for doing this, is the fucking CEO of Nexon Games, which is a subsidiary company of Nexon. So the person who was found guilty criminally of stealing trade secrets from NCSoft and moving to Bluehole to make a game is the CEO of Nexon's subsidiary. So if anybody would know that these people are fucked and to push this, and exactly how to push this, it would be the person who was found guilty of this exact crime previously. So if people believe that Nexon are pushing this for no reason and there's no chance that this has validation or legs whatsoever and this is completely frivolous and just bullying, this almost certainly for me illustrates that this is incredibly real, and almost certainly is this going to be like a way bigger deal than people think. This is not going to go away. At least the criminal charges look like they're certainly going to stick. And this situation is considerably worse and has way more evidence than the NCSoft and Bluehole one did in the first place. Because while they do claim that, of course, Terra was made using trade secrets by these people, by this person, who's, again, now works with Nexon, the game was not identical, and they didn't have access to an actual server that one side admits was being used and had files that were a trade secret on that server. So this is yet again a massive dump of information. So if you got to this point and you even understood what I was saying, congratulations. And hopefully this does help you to understand that this is going to be a very serious matter going forward, and it could result in Dark and Darker not releasing, because while they were able to reach a settlement due to the civil case in Korea, there is no civil case in Korea currently because the game's not being released there. So therefore they don't need to bring it up in Korea. So it's going to be predominantly fought criminally by the government in Korea for the individuals and perhaps the company later, and civilly in North America if they continue to try to release the game. Now, it's entirely possible that civilly the company is not found guilty in North America, or they reach a settlement, but the conditions of reaching a settlement between NCSoft and Bluehole do not exist. And Nexon has vastly more money than ironmace does, of course, and it does seem to me that they're going to pursue this to the full extent of their capability, which is almost limitless. I've not actually looked in the last couple of days if anything news came out from ironmace, because I've just been doing other things, but I figured this would be helpful for people. And again, if you want to see like a full deep dive on this where I go through everything and timeline it and put it in a concise manner, let me know, and it might be something I do on the main channel. But I have mostly been waiting and just looking at other stuff coming out that would contextualize things and help us understand, as I want to see the actual civil suit get filed in North America before I really deep dive, because then we'll have in words from Nexon exactly what they're alleging in a civil suit as opposed to what they're alleging criminally, as well as my opinion, and of course I'll speak to some lawyers on this one, the validity of what they're saying based on what we've got back from ironmace and what Nexon are saying in the insiders, etc. Which so far the only like training lawyers, you know, again I'll use that term, law students' opinions that I've seen and some people I've spoke to behind the scenes, is that this is looking real bad for ironmace. But there is hope, since this one was settled, and maybe that is the case in North America, but settled with what? Would be the question, and how much are they going to have to give up if that's the case? And is Nexon even going to entertain that thought when they feel extremely slighted by this whole thing? But there we go. Hopefully this helped in some way, and I know people are going to call me a shill for Nexon, people are going to call me a liar, but I'm just giving you the information, and you can do with it what you will, because whether you agree with me, disagree with me, this is just all stuff you can go and find if you want to go and put in the work yourself. And obviously this being the closest case we literally have in history ever between two Korean companies releasing a game with one person literally involved in one side now, I think this is extremely relevant and interesting. So yeah, thanks for watching, see you next time, peace out.
Yeah, so doesn't sound good for ironmace at all. Doesn't sound good for ironmace at all. And honestly, I do want to see the game come out, but this doesn't look good at all. It might release in North America, but like he said, if it does, we're going to see it probably a civil lawsuit, and we'll have to see what comes of that. I'm not sure what to take from it. Hopefully they didn't steal any trade secrets or any like code or assets or anything from Nexon. Like I really don't want that to be true. I really want to see this game come out, so hopefully they can prove it all. I don't know if I missed anything between now and the last video, but so far this is where we're caught up on, and they haven't released any more information yet. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Hey guys, if you like the video, make sure you head over to the page, hit that like button, scroll over, smash that subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get notified for future video drops, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.